I'm not your joke anymore. This ends tonight.
My wife Jessica and I had been married for 4 years when this all went down. I thought we had this solid partnership where I was the dependable provider and she was the ambitious dreamer. Looking back, I was completely delusional about the dynamic, but at the time, I genuinely believed I was being a good husband. When Jessica needed to relocate for what she called her dream position at this marketing firm, I didn't hesitate to leave my comfortable job behind. When she wanted to take expensive photography classes or needed new equipment for her various projects, I picked up overtime shifts without complaint. I thought that's what love looked like, sacrificing your own needs to fuel your partner's ambitions. For Jessica's 30th birthday, I decided to go absolutely nuclear with the celebration. We're talking about a downtown venue on the 47th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city skyline. The rental alone cost me $3,200, but I wanted her to feel like royalty. I ordered this elaborate 4-tier cake from the fancy bakery she always admired but said was too expensive. Chocolate ganache and vanilla bean layers with gold leaf detailing. The champagne fountain was another $800, but I'd seen her post pictures of similar setups on her Instagram with captions like, "Someday goals." I spent weeks coordinating with florists to import these rare orchids from Ecuador because she'd mentioned once, maybe 6 months earlier, that they were the most beautiful flowers she'd ever seen. The planning consumed my life for 2 solid months. After my regular job managing IT projects at a mid-sized consulting firm, I'd spend evenings calling vendors, comparing prices, arranging delivery schedules. I created detailed timelines, backup plans, even weather contingencies since part of the venue was outdoors. My credit card took a serious knocking. By the time everything was said and done, I'd spent close to $15,000. But seeing Jessica's face light up when she walked into that space made every late night and every dollar feel worth it. The guest list included 60 people, our families, college friends, her work colleagues, my buddies from the gym, neighbors we'd grown close to over the years. I'd personally called every single person to make sure they could attend, even arranging transportation for Jessica's elderly grandparents who lived 3 hours away in a small farming town. The whole evening felt like this perfect orchestration of our shared life. Everyone we cared about gathered in this stunning space to celebrate the woman I loved more than anything. Jessica looked absolutely radiant that night. She wore this emerald green dress we'd picked out together during a shopping trip that had taken us to 4 different malls over 2 weekends. Her hair was styled in these loose waves that caught the light from the city below, and she had this glow that made her seem like she belonged in a magazine spread. I stood there in my best suit, the navy one she'd helped me pick out for our 3rd anniversary, watching her laugh and mingle with our guests. Despite being exhausted from all the coordination and running on maybe 4 hours of sleep, I felt this deep sense of pride and accomplishment. The evening progressed beautifully for the first 3 hours. People were raving about the venue, the catered Mediterranean food, the attention to every little detail. Jessica's sister pulled me aside to tell me what an incredible husband I was, how lucky Jessica was to have someone who cared so much. My own mother, who could be critical about everything, said it was the most elegant party she'd ever attended. I was riding this high of having pulled off something truly special for the person I loved most in the world. Then came the speech portion of the evening around 9 p.m. Jessica grabbed the microphone from the DJ setup, and the room gradually quieted down as everyone gathered around. I positioned myself near the front, expecting this would be my moment. You know, the part where she acknowledges her husband who'd spent 2 months planning this celebration. Instead, she launched into this lengthy tribute to Marcus Thompson, a colleague from her marketing firm whom I'd met maybe 3 times at company events. My guiding light through the most challenging projects, she called him, her voice carrying clearly across the room while Marcus stood there smiling awkwardly. The person who truly understands my vision and supports my professional growth when others just don't get it. She went on for what felt like an eternity, detailing how Marcus had mentored her through difficult client relationships, believed in her ideas when others didn't, and become her closest confidant at work. She talked about late nights at the office working on campaigns together, weekend brainstorming sessions, and how he'd helped her navigate office politics. The more she spoke, the more intimate it sounded, and I started feeling this knot forming in my stomach as I watched her face light up talking about another man. I stood there with this increasingly strained smile plastered on my face, thinking she was just being thorough with her gratitude and would eventually get to me. The anticipation was eliminating me, but I waited patiently while she thanked her parents for their unwavering support, her sister for being her best friend, several college friends for staying in touch, even the DJ for playing exactly the right music, but she never mentioned my name, not once. Not even a passing reference to her husband or the enormous effort that had gone into creating this perfect evening. Then came the moment that shattered my world completely. With this playful smile that I initially mistook for affection, Jessica announced she had a special surprise gift for me. She produced this small gift bag, black with silver handles and tissue paper sticking out the top, and handed it to me in front of our 60 guests while everyone started clapping and cheering, thinking it was sweet that she was finally acknowledging me after all. My hands were shaking slightly as I opened the bag, expecting maybe a watch or cufflinks or some other thoughtful token of appreciation for everything I'd done. Instead, I pulled out a black t-shirt with some weight to it, clearly good quality fabric. As I unfolded it, bold white letters across the front became visible to everyone in the room. Single again. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on that polished hardwood floor. Then, a few people started this nervous, uncomfortable laughter, like maybe it was some inside joke they didn't understand. Jessica was standing there grinning like she'd just delivered the punchline to the world's funniest comedy routine, clearly expecting me to laugh along with the supposed humor, but I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My hands were literally trembling as I held up that shirt, the fabric feeling impossibly heavy in my grip. The humiliation hit me like a physical blow to the chest. 4 years of marriage, all those sacrifices, all the nights I'd stayed up late paying bills or planning surprises exactly like this one. And she thought our relationship was material for public comedy. The weight of 60 pairs of eyes on me was absolutely crushing. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks, my throat constricting with a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and something that felt like grief. Some people were still laughing uncomfortably. Others were looking down at their drinks, and a few seemed genuinely shocked by what they'd witnessed. I wanted to disappear through the floor, to wake up from what had to be some kind of nightmare. But here's where I surprised even myself. Instead of yelling or throwing the shirt back at her or storming off in some dramatic rage-filled exit, I made what felt like the most calculated decision of my life. I calmly folded the shirt, placed it back in the bag with the tissue paper, and set it on the gift table next to the elaborate cake I'd special ordered. Then I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out the real surprise I'd been saving for the perfect moment. A diamond tennis bracelet from Tiffany that had cost me 3 months' salary after taxes. I'd been saving for this bracelet since the previous Christmas, adding money to a separate savings account with every single paycheck, skipping lunches and canceling my gym membership to afford it. The blue box felt substantial in my hand as I placed it right next to the birthday cake where everyone could see it, a small act of reclaiming some dignity in the moment. I didn't say a single word, didn't make any dramatic announcements. I just turned toward the exit and walked away from 4 years of my life. The cool October night air hit my face as I left that rooftop venue, sharp and clean after the stifling atmosphere inside. I could hear the party noise gradually fading behind me, the music still playing, the confused chatter of guests trying to process what they just witnessed, the clink of glasses as people awkwardly tried to continue celebrating. But I didn't turn around, not even once. I walked through the lobby, past the confused doorman, and into the parking garage where my sedan was waiting. I sat in the driver's seat for several minutes, staring at the steering wheel while my heart pounded so hard I thought it might actually burst through my chest. The reality of what had just happened started sinking in slowly, like cold water filling up my lungs. Jessica had humiliated me in front of everyone we knew, turned our marriage into a joke for the entertainment of our friends and family. And she'd done it with such casual cruelty that I knew this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment mistake. My phone started buzzing before I even left the parking garage. Jessica's name lit up the screen with an incoming call, but I let it go to voicemail. By the time I reached the highway, it was going off constantly. Call after call after call. I glanced at it once and saw the number climbing rapidly. 15 missed calls, then 25, then 40. Each buzz felt like another small violation, another attempt to drag me back into her drama. I drove straight to my buddy Ryan's apartment across town, my hands gripping the wheels so tight my knuckles went white. Ryan and I had been friends since college, and he was one of the few people who'd never been completely charmed by Jessica's public personality. He'd always been polite to her, but I'd caught him making subtle comments over the years that suggested he saw through her performance in ways I'd been too infatuated to notice. Ryan took one look at my face when he opened the door and didn't ask any questions. He just stepped aside, handed me a beer from his refrigerator, and pointed me toward his couch. I told him everything while pacing around his living room, the party I'd planned down to the last detail, the speech where she'd thanked Marcus instead of me, the t-shirt, the bracelet I'd left behind. By the time I finished talking and actually looked at my phone, it showed 89 missed calls from Jessica. 89 calls in less than 2 hours. I turned the phone completely off and tried to process what had just happened to my life. Ryan sat in his armchair, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just listening. When I finally ran out of words, he leaned back and said something that cut through all my confusion and hurt. Man, you don't come back from something like that. That wasn't a joke or some misguided attempt at humor. That was her telling you exactly what she thinks of your marriage, and she chose to do it in front of everyone you know. His words hit me like a revelation. That t-shirt wasn't some poorly thought-out prank or a moment of bad judgment. It was Jessica making a deliberate, public statement about how disposable she considered me to be. She'd turned our marriage into entertainment for our guests, and I'd been standing there like some clueless participant in her carefully orchestrated show. The premeditation of it, having the shirt made, planning the moment, timing it for maximum impact, made it so much worse than a spontaneous insult. I realized I'd spent 4 years systematically erasing myself to make room for Jessica's ambitions and ego. I'd relocated for her career, turned down promotions that would have required travel because she didn't like being alone, skipped vacations so she could attend conferences and networking events, and funded her expensive hobbies while neglecting my own interests. I'd convinced myself this was what partnership looked like, but really, I'd just been slowly disappearing while she built her life around other people's attention and validation. That Monday morning, I did something I should have done years earlier. I put my own needs first for once. I called Patricia Williams, a divorce attorney someone from work had mentioned during a conversation about his own messy divorce. She was this no-nonsense woman in her 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes who'd built a reputation for handling clean, efficient divorces without unnecessary drama. We met at her downtown office that same afternoon, and I laid out the entire situation while she took notes. "What's your primary goal here?" she asked, pen poised over a yellow legal pad filled with her precise handwriting. "I want out," I told her without hesitation. "Clean, quiet, no public drama or drawn-out battles. I just want to end this marriage with whatever dignity I have left." She nodded like she'd heard variations of this conversation 1,000 times before. Within a week, we had preliminary papers drawn up, and I felt this enormous sense of relief knowing I'd taken concrete action. Meanwhile, I threw myself into work with an intensity I hadn't felt in years. My boss, Gregory, had been trying for months to get me to take on this massive account with a demanding tech startup that was notorious for burning through project managers. I'd always declined because Jessica didn't like me working late or traveling for business. She said it made her feel neglected and unimportant. Now I marched into his office first thing Tuesday morning and told him I wanted the assignment. The relief and excitement on his face was obvious. He'd been waiting for me to step up like this for a long time. The project was absolutely brutal, but incredibly invigorating. 14-hour days, difficult clients with impossible deadlines, constant problem-solving, and crisis management. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was operating at full capacity, mentally and professionally. I wasn't constantly checking my phone to see if Jessica needed something or rushing home to avoid conflict about working late. I was just fully present, solving problems, proving to myself that I was capable of much more than I'd been allowing myself to achieve. I also started running every morning before dawn, not because I'd ever been particularly athletic, but because I needed some way to process the anger and hurt that kept churning in my chest like acid. That first week was absolutely miserable. My lungs burned after half a mile, my legs ached for days afterward, and I could barely manage to run a full mile without stopping to walk. But something about the physical pain felt appropriate and cleansing. It was like I was literally running away from the person I'd become during my marriage. By the third week, I was managing 3 miles every morning. By the second month, I was running 5 miles daily at 5 a.m. rain or shine, snow or heat. My body started changing in ways I hadn't expected. My shoulders got broader, my stomach flatter, my legs noticeably stronger. But more importantly, my entire mindset began shifting during those solitary morning runs. With just my footsteps and breathing and the empty streets for company, I started remembering who I'd been before Jessica came into my life and gradually convinced me to shrink myself to make her more comfortable. Jessica tried everything in her power to get me back over the following weeks. The 89 missed calls that first night eventually stopped, but then came an avalanche of text messages. Short, desperate ones at first. Where are you? We need to talk. This is ridiculous. Then longer, increasingly rambling messages about how the shirt was just a joke that went too far, how she'd never meant to hurt me, how she missed me and wanted to work through our problems like mature adults. I didn't respond to any of them. Each message felt like another small attempt to pull me back into her orbit, and I'd finally developed enough self-respect to recognize manipulation when I saw it. She wasn't apologizing because she understood what she'd done wrong. She was panicking because her safety net had disappeared, and she was facing the consequences of her actions for the first time. About 6 weeks after I'd moved out and started staying in a small, furnished apartment closer to my office, Jessica showed up at my door unannounced. I was surprised to see her through the peephole. She looked terrible, with unwashed hair, dark circles under her eyes, wearing an oversized sweater and jeans I'd never seen before. She'd clearly been crying recently, and for a moment I felt a flicker of the old instinct to comfort her. But I squashed it immediately and opened the door just wide enough to talk. She begged me to let her inside so we could have a proper conversation, saying we needed to discuss our situation like rational adults. I told her we could say whatever she needed to say right there in the hallway where we were standing. She launched into this prepared speech about how she'd made a terrible mistake with the party, how the whole thing had gotten out of hand, how she'd been trying to be edgy and funny but had completely misjudged the situation and hurt me unintentionally. She kept emphasizing how much she loved me and missed me, how empty the apartment felt without me, how she wanted to fix our marriage and move forward together. But I noticed throughout her entire monologue that she never actually apologized for the specific humiliation she'd inflicted or acknowledged why what she'd done was so fundamentally cruel and damaging. She just wanted me to get over it, forgive her poor judgment, and come back home so things could return to normal. You made your choice that night in front of 60 people, I told her, my voice steady and calm. I made mine when I walked out and hired a lawyer. We're done, Jessica. Completely done. She started crying then, saying I was being unreasonable and vindictive, that married couples were supposed to work through difficult problems together, that I was throwing away 4 years over one stupid mistake. But I wasn't interested in her tears or her attempts to reframe public humiliation as a simple error in judgment. The divorce wrapped up 4 months later, with Patricia handling the process quickly and smoothly. We split things fairly. Jessica kept the apartment since she made more money. I held onto my car and retirement accounts, and we divided the rest without much drama. I left that marriage with my dignity intact and a stronger sense of who I was outside of it. Around the same time the papers were signed, I heard through friends that Marcus Thompson had left Jessica's company and moved to Portland with his girlfriend. Just like that, the man she leaned on most was gone, and the base of her career crumbled overnight. Jessica tried to reinvent herself with a lifestyle podcast called Authentically Yours, where she gave advice on growth, work, and relationships. The idea of her giving relationship advice after what she'd done was laughable, not just to me, but to plenty of others too. She released only 3 episodes before the flood of harsh comments forced her to shut it down. Word about the party had spread online, and her reputation collapsed across several platforms. Her carefully built social media image, something she had obsessed over for years, began falling apart as followers left in droves. I didn't feel joy watching it, but I couldn't feel sorry for her either. Actions come with results. And for once, she couldn't talk or charm her way out of them. While her world fell apart, mine was gaining speed. The tough project I had taken on led to a major promotion in half a year. Gregory made me senior project manager with a big raise, my own team, and the kind of respect I had been chasing since college. For the first time in years, I had real money of my own to use however I wanted, not drained by someone else's pricey tastes or pipe dreams. I also began mentoring 2 young entrepreneurs I met at a networking event, Alex Chen and Jordan Martinez. Both were brilliant mid-20s guys with a creative idea, a delivery app made for small local shops. They had the talent and drive, but no business know-how. I helped them put together a business plan, linked them with investors, and eventually invested my own money. Watching their garage project turn into a growing company with staff and steady revenue became one of the most rewarding parts of my career. About 6 months after the divorce, I started writing late at night as a way to process everything. At first, it was just me, a laptop, and a need to work through the chaos, the party, the humiliation, the 89 missed calls as I drove to Ryan's place. But soon it turned into more than a personal diary. It became a record of my climb back to self-respect and independence, the morning runs that gave me strength, the career progress that restored my confidence, and the rediscovery of who I was when I wasn't bending myself to make someone else happy. I launched a blog called 89 Missed Calls and posted essays about healing after betrayal and choosing yourself over toxic ties. My first post barely reached a dozen people, mostly Ryan and a few friends. But as I kept writing about the divorce, career wins, and the joy of making choices for myself, something shifted. Strangers began finding my words online. Comments trickled in from people I'd never met. A woman in Ohio working through a messy divorce, a man in California hurt by a dishonest coworker. "This is exactly what I needed today," one wrote. "You put into words what I couldn't," said another. The blog grew slowly at first, then snowballed as readers began sharing posts with friends facing their own struggles. Within half a year, thousands of readers across the country, and even overseas, were following. What resonated wasn't just the details of my divorce, but the bigger themes: choosing self-worth over comfort, walking away from what drags you down, and piecing yourself back together after someone tries to break you. Running became my therapy. I went from struggling through a mile to training for half marathons, then full ones. Each morning before sunrise, pounding the streets while the city still slept, I grew tougher in body and mind. I was no longer the man waiting for permission or sacrificing his dreams for someone else's comfort. I was building a version of myself I finally liked and respected. As the blog's audience grew, doors opened I never could have pictured in my married life. A local business group asked me to speak about resilience at their monthly meeting. 50 people showed up, and their standing ovation stunned me. A regional magazine featured my story in their success column with an in-depth interview and photos. Companies began reaching out, asking me to consult on motivation, teamwork, and leadership. I said yes to gigs that would have been impossible before. Weekend seminars, travel-heavy conferences, events Jessica would have dismissed as a waste of time. The blog grew into more than just my story. 89 missed calls turned into a banner for others who refused to stay broken. My inbox filled with letters from divorced men and women, betrayed business partners, and people blindsided by those they trusted most. I began answering them one by one, offering advice and encouragement born from my own scars. Alex and Jordan's delivery startup, Local Link, blew up faster than anyone thought possible. I had put in a small investment early on, which gave me a slice of ownership. As their users grew into the hundreds of thousands, my finances changed completely. I wasn't rich, but I was more secure than I had ever been during my marriage, when every dime had been poured into Jessica's pricey hobbies and failed career plans. About a year after the divorce was final, I got an invite I never could have pictured back then. A business conference in Barcelona wanted me to give the keynote on how to turn personal loss into professional growth. The audience, 500 entrepreneurs and leaders from across Europe, would be there to hear me speak about resilience, reinvention, and the power of choosing yourself over toxic ties. Standing on that stage in a glass-walled hall overlooking the Mediterranean, seeing faces from dozens of countries, I felt an overwhelming sense of triumph. Just 2 years earlier, I had been the guy holding a Single Again t-shirt while my wife smirked and friends squirmed. Now, I was getting paid well to share lessons that others actually wanted to hear. The talk was a huge hit. I explained how betrayal, while crushing at first, could open the door to a better life if you had the courage to step through. I laid out clear steps to rebuild confidence, focusing on work, health, and helping others, while showing how pain could become fuel for purpose. The applause shook the room, and afterward, dozens of people lined up to swap cards, trade stories, and thank me. Then, about 18 months after the divorce, Jessica appeared at my apartment one stormy night. I was shocked to see her through the peephole, soaked, no umbrella, looking small and worn out. She wore clothes I didn't recognize, and her usual sharp posture had faded into something close to shame. Against better judgment, I let her in. She stood dripping on my new hardwood floors, and for the first time since I'd met her, she seemed truly sorry. Not just sorry she'd been caught. "I made a terrible mistake that night," she whispered. "The shirt, the jokes, all of it. I thought I was being clever, but I only hurt you. I've regretted it every day since." She told me how everything had fallen apart after Marcus left, and I stayed gone. Her career stalled without his guidance. Her friends turned away after the party stunt, and her attempts to rebuild her image online had flopped. "I need you," she said at last. The words landed heavy, but instead of the pride or justice I thought I'd feel, I felt nothing at all. No hate, no pity, not even the bitter thrill of watching her crash, just emptiness. I looked at the woman I had once bent over backwards for and realized she was a stranger. "You didn't need me when you handed me that shirt in front of 60 people, I said, calm and firm. "You don't get to need me now because your plans failed." She broke down, sobbing that she was sorry, that she'd undo that night if she could, that she finally understood what she had lost. But I wasn't moved by her apologies or desperation. That door in my life was sealed shut. I handed her a towel, waited for the storm to ease, and walked her out. She left without drama, and I never saw her again. 2 years later, my life looks nothing like those 4 years of marriage. The blog grew into a thriving business with speaking gigs, coaching, and a book, The Gift of Walking Away, that hit bestseller lists. Local Link went national, and my stake in it finally made me wealthy. I bought a home in the mountains, something I had dreamed of since college but never tried for because Jessica hated the idea. Now I have a study for writing, a gym where I train for marathons, and windows that frame the changing peaks. Each morning I run trails in the silence of the woods instead of pounding city pavement. That solitude gave me the mental clarity I never knew I was missing. I'm in a serious relationship with Sarah, a high school teacher I met near one of my running spots. She is everything Jessica wasn't. Steady instead of dramatic, caring instead of demanding, happy with simple joys instead of chasing attention. We've been together more than a year, and she treats us as partners, not a performance. The strangest part is how Jessica's attempt to humiliate me set all of this in motion. That stupid t-shirt forced me to face how much I had given up to keep her happy. It showed me I was living someone else's version of my life. Without that sharp, painful moment, I might have wasted decades in a marriage that erased me piece by piece. I kept that tennis bracelet for years. Not out of love, but as a reminder of who I used to be. The guy who spent months' pay on someone who saw him as disposable. Sometimes I'd pull it from the drawer and almost pity that version of myself, so desperate to be loved by someone incapable of loving him back. People ask if I ever think of calling Jessica or if I feel sorry for how her life collapsed. The truth? No. She made her choice when she mocked me in front of everyone. I made mine when I walked away to build something better. Closure doesn't always mean forgiveness. It can just mean acceptance and the will to keep going. The best revenge isn't plotting payback or waiting for karma. It's building a life so full and meaningful that their opinion no longer matters. Jessica wanted me single again? Well, she got her wish. And I've never been happier to prove her right in the only way that matters. The man I am now, confident, wealthy, and content, is someone she never could have pictured and never deserved. And instead of bitterness, I feel grateful. That ugly night became the spark that changed everything.